Ah, Dirt Trax FX. My childhood just walked in, slapped me across the face, and told me to hang up those gaudy FPS games and modern day treks through dungeons, just so I can reacquaint myself with the gaming world gone by. Dirt Trax FX, as the name suggests, is your typical dirt bike affair. Tack on that FX to any SNES title, and you know that the famous chip has been forged into the cartridge like a gem on a sword's hilt. Typically, we associate the FX chip with polygonal graphics for a console that you just didn't expect it on. However, this wasn't the only purpose. The FX chip was essentially a processor that included extended memory. Kind of like the memory expansion for the Nintendo 64 years later. Or if you want to look at it even more loosely, it's like adding more RAM to your PC to help with the capture and fetching of data. This allowed polygons, or in some cases higher quality sprites and 2D textures, to be rendered and not take a huge hit on the game's performance. Another game that some may not even realize utilized the FX chip was Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island. Hell, even Doom on the Super Nintendo used the FX chip, and contrary to popular belief, was not a true 3D game per se. It was a complex system of perspective projection, say that 3 times fast, and the use of displacements. There's no need to go into further depth here, but yes, games of this type use tricks of programming prowess to give the illusion of 3D. Now, getting back to our main game, Dirt Trax FX, we have to bask in the glow of how well this game turned out on the Super Nintendo. Right? Prior to this, very few racing games utilized polygons. Some examples would be Daytona USA and Virtual Racing in the arcade. But they did find their way onto consoles, mostly 32 bits or higher, but there was an exception. Virtual Racing actually got a chance on the Genesis and Master Drive. However, the expensive chipset and tech used to create the game actually increased the price up to $100 US. Now, in Dirt Trax FX, we find a very nice looking map layout with polygons being used for every detail of the track. The only exceptions to this are the 2D sprites representing the racers and the poor little finish line attendant. Animation of the racers on the selection menu and the end race credits are pretty great, albeit very subtle. The 2D sprites have enough frames to adequately depict movement, such as leaning and turning around corners, but is also for pulling back and doing wheelies or pushing down when you want to glide down a slope. The game provides us with 4 difficulty levels, with 50cc being the slow, simpler one, all the way up to 500cc, which is unlocked after you've completed the rest. A unique design choice for this game was to have limitations on unlocking the various circuits. The 50cc can only unlock the second circuit, whereas the 250cc can unlock all the circuits. Your selection of characters are 8 obvious 90s stereotypes, such as the radical dude with the sweatband or the goth girl caked in black eyeliner. Each racer even comes equipped with their own silly soundtrack, almost as if they were a wrestler.
Boy, you better watch your back before you get the last ride on my dirt bike.
Granted, the music is just okay enough that most can get by. Speaking of which, get used to whatever character you choose. Once you get the game down and you can stay in first for long periods of time, you are comforted by your own tunes. Now, if you're not used to the game or you're unable to stay in first, maybe it's a difficult track, get used to a wonderful honking noise and the ever annoying swap of your theme song with whoever you're competing with. That means the game doesn't really have its own music besides the characters. Each character has their own song, and whoever's in first, that's the song that plays. Now, everything else on the topic of sound is your basic ordeal. Not great, but not ear-piercingly bad. Now, while I played the game, I did a little bit of research on it as well. I found some misnomers spread around. One thing I saw was the proclamation that the game had 22 tracks, even stating this on the cover. What? I only counted 3 multiplayer arenas, we'll get to that later, and 15 tracks spread across 5 circuits. Each circuit contains 5 tracks. However, Radical, Nightmare, and Doom circuits only have 3 unique tracks, and sandwiched in between are 2 tracks from other circuits. The final circuit, however, dubbed Forbidden, only has 1 unique track and uses the hardest tracks from before. This brings the total to 18, so unless I saw something wrong while I was playing, I have no clue where the other 4 are, or 7 if you don't count the arenas. Now, controls are pretty basic, and although I was unable to track down an instruction manual, I'll do my best to lay it out. A and X both make you go, but I am under the impression that the X button actually has a higher throttle, and allows for easier maneuverability for tight corners. I didn't see much of a difference in speed, however, so I may be wrong on this one. The L and R buttons are used for tighter turns and are essential on some of the trickier layouts in the game. Some tracks can be done with just the L and R and not even using left and right on the control pad. Up and down, however, are useful for getting more airtime or changing your angle when coming down to hit a slope. Very reminiscent of Excitebike. Overall, the controls and how the bike performs is average to say the least. I wouldn't say they are great, especially when the polygonal graphics actually hinder movement at times, and the obnoxious hitboxes with other racers cause some janky movements. But they work. With all this being said, it's just a simple racing game. Other buttons on the controller or just combinations do nothing. No tricks here, folks. If you do happen to go off track or maybe even jump a little bit further ahead by going over a wall, you'll be treated with this wonderful turn back warning that then shows you a giant arrow on the screen that says, "Go here before you can continue on." Yes, unlike other racing games like Mario Kart, which kind of encourages shortcuts and jumping ahead of the pack, skipping huge parts of this game will net you a penalty. The penalty here is forcing you to backtrack. It'll be an even bigger issue later. As the tension builds up on a race, you find yourself just inches in front of second place. All of a sudden you're pushed or clipped off the side of one of the ridiculous layouts, such as Tut's Tomb, and have to make your way all the way around until you can find a lowered portion of the track to get back on. This is what I call old school trappings.
So you got things like trial and error, things that just make you start over from the beginning, or trappings like this where if you make a wrong step you end up losing an entire circuit. Clipping is also an issue. I actually found myself at one point hitting a wall, turned slightly, and the next thing I know I was popped up on top of the second portion of the track. Could be useful, but unfortunately, like I stated before, you don't want to skip a lot, because then you end up having to start over, and it's just a big pain. As I mentioned before, there's an arena here. The arena allows you to play head-to-head and basically play tag. There's 3 arenas, but they're really basic. Really just big circles with some circles inside circles, and that's really all they are. Not too intuitive, but they didn't have to add multiplayer, so at least enjoy that. All in all, this game got mediocre ratings when it came out. There was slowdown, there was issues with some of the clipping, there was issues with some of the sprites, people didn't really like the music that much, but overall it's still entertainment. I mean, how many movies come out that you just look at and you know that movie is garbage, it's terrible, but it's fun, and it's entertainment, and that's what you go and you watch it for, and you take it with a grain of salt, and that's what you got to do with some of these older games. As you've seen, I'm not going to focus on wonderful games that everybody loves or terrible games that everybody hates. I just want to pick on some of the games that you don't see a lot of love for, and some of us might actually enjoy. That being said, I am Rogerz, the Urban Legend, and I will see you again very soon. Oh, that hurt.